The whispers traveled faster than a runaway stagecoach through the dusty streets of Silver Creek, Texas, in the summer of 1875. Charlotte Newcomb stood frozen on the wooden boardwalk, the weight of every accusing stare pressing down on her shoulders like lead. She clutched her worn leather satchel tighter, her knuckles white with strain as the townspeople pointed and muttered without bothering to lower their voices. "There she is," said Mrs. Peterson, the baker's wife, her finger extended like a weapon. "The ruined woman." Charlotte kept her chin high despite the heat of shame that flushed her cheeks. At 22, she had already endured more tragedy than most faced in a lifetime. The scandal wasn't of her making, but in a town like Silver Creek, the truth mattered less than the story people preferred to believe. "Harlot," someone hissed from the shadow of the general store. Charlotte quickened her pace, desperate to reach the small room she rented above the dressmaker's shop before the tears threatening to spill made a public spectacle of her pain. She had returned to her hometown after 2 years away only to find herself branded by rumors and lies. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her pause. A tall figure on horseback rounded the corner, dust swirling around him and his chestnut mare. Quinn Yates, a cowboy she didn't recognize, reined his horse to a stop just ahead of her. His weathered Stetson cast a shadow over eyes that studied her with unsettling intensity. "Miss Newcomb?" His voice was deep, with a hint of a drawl that suggested he wasn't from Texas originally. Charlotte stiffened. "I don't believe we've met, sir." "We haven't." He dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in a saddle. "But I've heard about you." Her heart sank. Of course he had. Everyone had heard about Charlotte Newcomb, the once respectable daughter of the late Judge Newcomb, who'd left town proper and returned disgraced. "Then I have nothing to say to you," she replied, attempting to step around him. Quinn moved slightly, blocking her path without touching her. "I don't put much stock in gossip, Miss Newcomb. I'm more interested in hiring a teacher for my sister." Charlotte blinked in surprise. Before the scandal, before she'd been forced to leave, she had been the schoolteacher in Silver Creek. "You've been misinformed about my standing in this community, Mr. Yates. No one here would approve of me teaching anyone." A smile played at the corners of his mouth as he removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair. "Good thing I don't need their approval. I've got a ranch 10 miles south. My sister Rose needs educating, and I hear you're the best teacher this county's ever seen." "Mr. Yates, Quinn," he corrected. "Mr. Yates," she insisted. "I appreciate the offer, but I must decline. My situation is complicated." He studied her face for a long moment before nodding toward the whispering townsfolk who had gathered to watch their exchange. "They pointed and called you ruined." His voice dropped lower, meant for her ears alone. "I see a future, and it starts today, if you'll let it." Charlotte felt something stir within her chest, not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. "Your sister," she said cautiously. "How old is she?" 14. "Smart as a whip, but growing up wild as a Mustang without proper schooling. Our parents died 3 years back. I've been trying to manage the ranch and raise her right, but—" He shrugged, honest vulnerability crossing his face. "I'm better with cattle than curriculum." Before Charlotte could respond, Mrs. Peterson approached, her face pinched with disapproval. "Charlotte Newcomb, have you no shame? Flirting openly on Main Street after everything you've done." Quinn turned slowly, squaring his shoulders as he faced the woman. "Madam, Miss Newcomb and I are discussing a business arrangement, professional and proper." "There's nothing proper about that woman," Mrs. Peterson sniffed. "Do you know what she—" "I know she's standing right here," Quinn interrupted, his tone polite but firm. "And I know disrespect when I hear it." Mrs. Peterson's mouth opened and closed like a trout gasping for water before she turned and hurried away, muttering about the decline of decent society. Charlotte looked up at Quinn, astonished by his defense. "My offer stands," he said simply. "Room and board at my ranch, fair wages, and a fresh start away from all this." He gestured vaguely toward the town. "Think about it. I'll be at the Cattleman's Hotel until noon tomorrow." With that, he tipped his hat, remounted his horse, and rode away, leaving Charlotte standing in the street with the first tendrils of hope taking root in her heart. Later that evening, Charlotte sat in her sparse rented room, a half-packed trunk open before her. The opportunity Quinn Yates offered seemed too good to be true, which made her wary. Life had taught her that kindness often came with hidden costs. A knock at her door startled her. Opening it cautiously, she found Mary Wilson, one of the few people in town who still treated her with decency. "I heard about the Cowboy," Mary said without preamble, stepping inside. At 35, the dressmaker had never married and seemed content with her independence. "The whole town's talking." "Of course they are," Charlotte sighed, gesturing for her friend to sit in the room's only chair while she perched on the edge of the bed. "Are you considering it? Going to his ranch?" Charlotte twisted the simple gold band she wore on her right hand, her mother's wedding ring, the only thing of value she had left. "I don't know, it could be an escape from this prison of whispers, but I know nothing about him." Mary leaned forward. "I made discreet inquiries. Quinn Yates bought the old Morrison place 3 years ago. Turned it around from nearly bankrupt to one of the most promising cattle operations in the county. He's got no wife, keeps to himself mostly, but folks who do business with him say he's fair and honest, never causes trouble in town. And his sister, real enough. I've seen her a few times when they come in for supplies. Looks like she could use a woman's influence if you ask me." Charlotte was silent for a long moment. "They'll say he hired me for improper reasons." Mary's eyes softened. "They'll say that no matter what you do, Charlotte, at least at the ranch, you won't have to hear it every day." When Charlotte still hesitated, Mary reached out to squeeze her hand. "What happened with Edward Walsh wasn't your fault. Everyone who truly knows you understands that." Charlotte flinched at the name. Edward Walsh, the banker's son who had courted her, promised marriage, then abandoned her when she refused his improper advances. His vengeful lies had destroyed her reputation and forced her to leave Silver Creek to find work in San Antonio. She'd only returned because her aunt had fallen ill and needed care in her final months. "It doesn't matter what's true," Charlotte said quietly. "Only what people believe. Then maybe it's time to find people who'll believe something different about you." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Charlotte had barely slept, weighing her limited options until the first light crept through her window. By the time she walked into the lobby of the Cattleman's Hotel, her decision was made. Quinn stood near the front desk, speaking with the clerk. He turned at her approach, and something like relief crossed his features. "Miss Newcomb, Mr. Yates." She kept her voice steady. "I've considered your offer and I have conditions." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I expected no less from a teacher. I require a written contract stating the terms of my employment. I must have my own private quarters, and I need to understand that this arrangement is strictly professional." He nodded, completely unperturbed by her demands. Already had a contract drawn up. He produced a folded paper from his vest pocket. "You'll have the guest cabin. It's small but sound. As for professional boundaries, you have my word as a gentleman." Charlotte accepted the document, scanning it quickly. The terms were more than fair, generous even. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Yates? There must be other teachers without my complications." His expression turned serious. "Not in these parts, and not with your qualifications. The nearest school is 30 miles away and Rose needs education now." He paused. "As for the rest, I judge people by their actions, not by gossip. Whatever happened before, it's not my business unless you choose to make it so." Charlotte studied him, searching for deceit and finding none in his steady gaze. "When would you like me to start?" "Today, if possible." Charlotte thought of her half-packed trunk, the hostile stares that followed her through town, and the emptiness of her future if she stayed. "I'll need an hour to gather my belongings." Quinn's smile returned, warming his eyes. "I'll have the wagon ready." The journey to the Yates ranch took most of the afternoon. Charlotte sat beside Quinn on the wagon seat, her small trunk and 2 valises secured in the back. The farther they traveled from Silver Creek, the lighter she felt, as though the weight of the town's judgment was a physical burden she could leave behind. "Tell me about your sister," she said, breaking the companionable silence that had settled between them. "Rose is." He paused, considering his words. "Spirited, lost our mother when she was 8, father when she was 11. She's had to grow up too fast in some ways, not enough in others." "And you've been raising her alone all this time," he nodded, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Doing my best, which isn't always good enough. She needs more than I can give her." "What about her education so far? Reading's strong, she devours any book she can get her hands on. Writing's passable, arithmetic." He grimaced. "Let's just say counting cattle is about as far as she's gotten." Charlotte smiled despite herself. "And what are your expectations for her education?" "I want her to have choices," he said simply. "More than most women get out here. If she wants to run the ranch someday, I want her to be able to do the books and read contracts. If she wants something else entirely, I want her prepared for that too." His answer surprised Charlotte. Most men she knew viewed education for girls as an unnecessary extravagance, limited to just enough reading to study the Bible and enough arithmetic to manage household accounts. "That's progressive thinking, Mr. Yates," he glanced at her. "Quinn, please, and it's not progressive, just practical. Rose is too smart to waste." As the wagon crested a hill, the Yates ranch came into view. A sturdy 2-story house stood at the center, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. The land stretched out in gentle rolls, dotted with grazing cattle. It wasn't the largest spread Charlotte had seen, but everything from the freshly painted buildings to the well-maintained fences spoke of care and attention. "It's lovely," she said honestly. "It's home," Quinn replied, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached the house, a slender figure darted out the front door. Rose Yates had her brother's brown hair, though hers fell in a single long braid down her back. She wore a practical dress with boots peeking out beneath the hem, clearly chosen for ranch work rather than fashion. "You're back," she called, then stopped short at the sight of Charlotte, her expression turned wary. "Who's this?" Quinn brought the wagon to a halt. "Rose, this is Miss Newcomb. She's agreed to be your teacher." Rose crossed her arms. "I don't need a teacher." "The fact that you think that proves you do," Quinn replied with the patience of someone who'd had this argument before. Charlotte climbed down from the wagon, smoothing her skirts. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Rose. Your brother tells me you enjoy reading." The girl's stance remained defensive. So I've brought some books you might not have seen before." Charlotte gestured to one of her valises. "Including a novel about a girl who disguises herself as a boy to have adventures. It was quite popular in the East last year." Interest flickered in Rose's eyes before she masked it. "I don't have time for silly stories. I have responsibilities here." "Your responsibility right now is to help Miss Newcomb get settled," Quinn said firmly as he lifted Charlotte's trunk from the wagon. "Show her to the guest cabin and help her unpack." Rose looked like she might argue, but after a moment of silent rebellion, she turned on her heel. "This way," she said over her shoulder. Charlotte exchanged a glance with Quinn, who gave her an apologetic smile. "She'll come around," he murmured. "Eventually." The guest cabin was about 50 yards from the main house, close enough for convenience, but far enough for privacy. It was indeed small, with just one main room and a tiny bedroom, but it was clean and solid. A wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, a small sofa, and bookshelves made up the furnishings of the main room. "It's not much," Rose said, watching Charlotte's reaction carefully. "It's perfect," Charlotte replied honestly. After her cramped rented room in town, the cabin felt like a palace. "Thank you for showing me the way." Rose hovered in the doorway, curiosity warring with her desire to appear disinterested. "Why did Quinn hire you? There's plenty of women closer who could teach." Charlotte set down her valise. "I was the teacher in Silver Creek before I left 2 years ago." "Your brother thought I was qualified." "Why'd you leave?" The directness of the question took Charlotte aback. "That's a rather personal matter," Rose shrugged. "People in town say you're ruined. That true?" Charlotte felt her cheeks flush. "People say many things, Rose. Not all of them are worth listening to." "So it's not true." The truth is rarely as simple as gossip makes it sound. Charlotte opened her valise and began removing books. "Would you like to see that novel I mentioned?" Rose eyed the books warily, then stepped further into the cabin. "I suppose it wouldn't hurt to look." By the time Quinn arrived with Charlotte's trunk, Rose was sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the pages of Little Women with obvious interest. "Getting along, I see," he said, setting the trunk down. Rose jumped up as if caught doing something forbidden. "I was just being polite." Quinn's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Of course you were. Dinner's in an hour, Miss Newcomb. Nothing fancy, but you're welcome to join us at the house." "Thank you, I'll be there." Charlotte smiled as Rose reluctantly put down the book and followed her brother out. When the door closed behind them, Charlotte sank onto the sofa, overwhelmed by the day's changes. For the first time in 2 years, she felt something dangerously close to hope. Over the following weeks, Charlotte settled into a routine at the Yates ranch. Mornings were devoted to Rose's lessons, conducted at the kitchen table in the main house. Afternoons often found Charlotte helping with whatever household tasks needed attention or preparing the next day's lessons. Evenings were her own, spent reading or writing letters to Mary, her only correspondent from Silver Creek. Rose proved to be as intelligent as Quinn had claimed, quickly advancing in arithmetic once Charlotte found ways to relate the subject to ranch management. Her resistance gradually softened, especially after Charlotte introduced her to more books featuring strong female characters. Quinn kept a respectful distance, professional in his interactions but unfailingly kind. Sometimes Charlotte would catch him watching her with an unreadable expression, but he never overstepped the boundaries she had established. He worked from sunup to sundown most days, returning dust-covered and exhausted, but always taking time to ask about Rose's progress. One evening in late August, Charlotte sat on the small porch of her cabin, enjoying the cooler air after a sweltering day. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up to find Quinn walking toward her, his hat in his hands. "Evening, Miss Newcomb. Mind if I join you?" "Please," she gestured to the empty chair beside her. He settled into it with a tired sigh. "Rose tells me she's learning about the Constitution." Charlotte nodded. "She's quite interested in the amendments, particularly the implications of the 15th. "Voting rights for former slaves," Quinn said, surprising her with his knowledge. "Yes, she asked if it might someday apply to women as well." Quinn chuckled. "That sounds like her, always pushing boundaries. She reminds me of myself at that age, questioning everything." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "I wanted to thank you," Quinn said finally. "Rose is flourishing under your guidance. I haven't seen her this engaged with learning since our mother was alive. She's a joy to teach. Challenging at times, but that's part of what makes it rewarding." Quinn turned to look at her directly. "You've brought more than education to this ranch, Charlotte. You've brought life back to it." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it warmed her more than it should have. "I should be thanking you," she replied softly. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." His expression grew serious. "Can I ask you something personal?" Charlotte tensed slightly but nodded. "Whatever happened in Silver Creek, does it still haunt you?" She looked away, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Less than it did, but yes. Would it help to talk about it, not out of curiosity, but—" He paused. "I've found some burdens are lighter when shared." Charlotte considered refusing, as she always had when anyone broached the subject. But something about the quiet evening and Quinn's genuine concern loosened the knot that had held her secrets tight for so long. "I was engaged," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "To Edward Walsh, the banker's son. We were to be married in the spring of 1873. Quinn remained silent, giving her space to continue at her own pace. "Edward was not who I thought he was. He expected certain liberties before our marriage that I was unwilling to grant. When I refused him, he became angry, said no proper gentleman would wait, that if I truly loved him." She swallowed hard. "When I still refused, he ended our engagement." told everyone in town that he had discovered I was not virtuous, that I had led him on, trapped him into a proposal. And they believed him, Quinn said, not a question but a statement laced with disgust. His family owns half the town. Mine was respected once, but after my father died, we had little influence left. It was easier for people to believe the worst of me than to question one of the Walsh family. So you left, Charlotte nodded. I had no choice. No one would hire me to teach their children, not even those who had known me all my life. I went to San Antonio, found work as a companion to an elderly woman. I only returned because my aunt was dying and needed someone to care for her. Quinn's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. And that Walsh fellow, he's still in Silver Creek. Yes, married now to the daughter of a cattle baron from Fort Worth, respectable and respected. The bitterness she tried so hard to suppress crept into her voice. That's not right, Quinn said quietly, not fair. Very little in this world is fair, Mr. Yates, especially for women. He was quiet for a long moment before saying, for what it's worth, I believe you, and I think any man who'd spread such lies isn't worth the title of gentleman. His simple statement of belief meant more to Charlotte than he could know. Tears pricked at her eyes and she blinked them away quickly. Thank you, she said, for listening and for believing. Always, he replied, and the way he said it made it sound like a promise. As summer faded into fall, life at the Yates Ranch continued its pleasant rhythm. Charlotte found herself looking forward to the quiet moments she shared with Quinn, conversations on her porch in the evenings, discussions about Rose's education, even the occasional meal they prepared together when their housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, visited her sister in the neighboring county. She tried not to dwell on how her heart seemed to beat faster when he was near, or how she found herself watching him work from her classroom window. Such feelings were dangerous. She had been burned once before, and she wouldn't risk her position or her hard-won peace for fleeting emotions. Rose, observant as ever, had begun casting knowing looks between her brother and teacher. "Quinn smiles more since you came," she remarked one afternoon as they worked on her geography lesson. "He's pleased with your progress," Charlotte replied diplomatically. Rose rolled her eyes. "That's not why, and you know it." Before Charlotte could formulate a response, the sound of galloping hooves interrupted them. Quinn rarely rode so recklessly, and Charlotte moved to the window with a sense of foreboding. It wasn't Quinn, but one of his ranch hands, Tom Riley, who practically fell from his horse in his haste to reach the house. "Miss Newcomb," he called, spotting her at the window. "Need your help. Quinn's been hurt." Charlotte's heart froze. "Rose, stay here," she ordered, already moving toward the door. Outside, Tom was catching his breath. "Fence post broke, horse spooked, Quinn got thrown and trampled some. He's conscious but in a bad way. The men are bringing him in now." "How far?" "Just passing the north pasture." "Told me to ride ahead, get things ready." Charlotte's teacher's training took over, pushing panic aside. "Rose, heat water and tear-clean sheets for bandages. Tom, help me prepare Quinn's bed and fetch the medical kit from the cabinet in his study." By the time Quinn was carried in, pale and bloodied but awake, Charlotte had transformed his bedroom into a makeshift infirmary. The ranch hands deposited him carefully on the bed, then withdrew awkwardly, leaving Charlotte to assess his injuries. "This seems to be taking our professional relationship in an unexpected direction," Quinn joked weakly as she cut away his ruined shirt. "Be quiet and let me work," she replied, hiding her fear behind brisk efficiency. His injuries were serious but not immediately life-threatening: 3 broken ribs, a badly sprained ankle, numerous cuts and bruises, and a gash on his forehead that would need stitching. "We should send for the doctor," Charlotte said as she cleaned the head wound. "Doc Peterson's away in Austin until next week," Quinn grimaced. "You'll have to make do with me." Charlotte had basic medical knowledge all teachers did to handle schoolyard accidents, but setting bones and stitching wounds was beyond her usual scope. "I'm not qualified for this, Quinn." He caught her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "You're more qualified than anyone else for 50 miles, I trust you." Those 3 words steadied her. She took a deep breath and nodded. "This will hurt." Quinn smiled faintly. "Already does." Over the next hours, Charlotte cleaned and stitched his head wound, bound his ribs tightly, wrapped his ankle, and treated his other injuries as best she could. Rose assisted solemnly, her earlier bravado replaced by quiet concern for her brother. When she had done all she could, Charlotte sent Rose to bed with assurances that Quinn would recover. She herself settled into a chair beside his bed, determined to watch over him through the night. "You don't have to stay," Quinn murmured, the pain medication she'd given him making his words slightly slurred. "Yes, I do," she replied simply. He studied her face through half-closed eyes. "Why?" Charlotte couldn't articulate all the reasons: concern, duty, and feelings she wasn't ready to name aloud. "Because you would do the same for me." That seemed to satisfy him, and he drifted into a fitful sleep. Charlotte watched the rise and fall of his chest, each breath a small victory against fear. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, Quinn stirred and opened his eyes. "Charlotte," he called softly. She leaned forward, touching his hand. "I'm here. I dreamed you left." "I'm not going anywhere," she assured him. He turned his hand to grasp hers. "Good, because I think I'm falling in love with you." Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. She told herself it was the medication speaking, not the man, but her traitorous heart leaped anyway. "You should rest," she said gently. "We'll talk when you're feeling better." But Quinn held onto her hand. "No, need to say it now, in case—" "There's no in case," she interrupted firmly. "You're going to be fine." "Listen," he insisted. "When I first saw you in Silver Creek, standing there with your head high despite everyone's cruelty, I knew you were special. Stronger than any woman I'd ever met." Charlotte felt tears threaten. "Quinn, I didn't offer you this job out of pity. I offered it because I admired you from that first moment. And every day since then, I've found more reasons to admire you." He winced as he shifted, but continued determinedly. "I know you have reasons to be cautious, to protect yourself. I respect that. But when I'm well again, I'm going to court you properly, Charlotte Newcomb. If you'll let me." Charlotte sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might shatter the moment. She had built walls around her heart after Edward's betrayal, reinforced them with every whisper and pointed finger in Silver Creek. But somehow, Quinn had found a way through those defenses without even trying. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he replied. "I know you're kind and patient with Rose. I know you're brilliant and talented. I know you've faced injustice with dignity. I know the sound of your laugh makes my day brighter." His eyes held hers steadily. "What else do I need to know?" Charlotte struggled to find words. "People will talk. They'll say terrible things about both of us. Let them. Words can't hurt us unless we give them power." He squeezed her hand. "You don't have to answer now, just think about it." The medication began to pull him back toward sleep, his eyelids growing heavy. "Promise you'll think about it," he murmured. "I promise," Charlotte whispered, and continued to hold his hand long after he'd fallen asleep. Quinn's recovery progressed slowly over the following weeks. Charlotte divided her time between teaching Rose and tending to him with Mrs. Abernathy returning to handle the household duties. The ranch hands managed the daily work under the foreman's guidance, but everyone felt Quinn's absence keenly. They hadn't spoken again of his nighttime declaration. Charlotte wasn't sure if he even remembered it, and she hesitated to bring it up while he was still confined to his bed. Instead, she read to him, played chess with him, and discussed ranch business when he was strong enough. One afternoon in mid-October, Charlotte helped Quinn to the porch for his first extended time outdoors since the accident. He leaned heavily on her arm but insisted on walking rather than being carried. "Stubborn man," she chided gently as she settled him into a chair with a blanket over his legs. "Determined," he corrected with a smile. "There's a difference." Charlotte sat beside him, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the sight of gold and red leaves beginning to appear on the distant trees. "I've been thinking," Quinn said after a comfortable silence. "A dangerous pastime," she teased. He laughed, then winced as the movement jarred his healing ribs. About what I said the night I was hurt. Charlotte's heart skipped, so he did remember. You were in a great deal of pain, medicated, in pain, yes, confused, no. He turned to face her directly. I meant every word, Charlotte. She looked down at her hands, folded tightly in her lap. Quinn, if your answer is no, I understand, he said quietly. I'll respect your wishes and you'll always have a place here as Rose's teacher. It's not that, she said quickly, looking up to meet his gaze. It's just complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me. Charlotte took a deep breath. I care for you, Quinn, more than I should given my position here, but I'm afraid. Of what? Of being hurt again, of trusting and being betrayed, of what people will say about you for choosing someone like me. Quinn reached over to take her hand. First, you could never deserve any hurt that's come to you. Second, I'm not Edward Walsh. I would rather cut off my own hand than cause you pain. His eyes held hers intently. And third, I don't give a damn what anyone says about either of us. He shifted in his chair to face her more fully, ignoring the discomfort it clearly caused him. When I saw you in Silver Creek, standing there with the whole town pointing and calling you ruined, do you know what I thought? Charlotte shook her head. I thought, there's a woman who knows her own worth, no matter what anyone else believes, and I was right. He squeezed her hand. I don't see you as ruined, Charlotte. I see you as the beginning of something wonderful. Tears blurred Charlotte's vision, and if it doesn't work. If we try and fail, then we fail knowing we were brave enough to try. Quinn's smile was gentle. I'm not asking for promises, just a chance to show you that not all men are like the one who hurt you. Charlotte looked out at the ranch, at the life Quinn had built through determination and hard work. She thought of Rose, gradually blossoming under her care. She thought of the peace she had found here, away from the whispers and judgment. And she thought of Quinn, his quiet strength, his unwavering respect, his belief in her when she had stopped believing in herself. Yes, she said softly, then more firmly. Yes, I'll give us that chance. The joy that transformed his face was worth every moment of uncertainty. I should warn you, he said, bringing her hand to his lips for a kiss that sent warmth cascading through her. Once you say yes to one thing with me, I'm likely to ask for more. Such as? Charlotte asked, her voice unsteady. Such as permission to court you properly once I can walk without wincing. Such as the right to defend your honor against anyone who speaks ill of you. Such as? He hesitated, then continued with quiet intensity. Such as the privilege of asking you to become my wife when the time is right. Charlotte's breath caught. You're getting ahead of yourself, Quinn Yates. Just giving you fair warning of my intentions, Miss Newcomb. His eyes crinkled with a smile. I believe in honesty between us always. In that moment, looking into his eyes, Charlotte allowed herself to believe in the future he saw for them, not perfect, perhaps, but built on something stronger than the gossip and lies that had defined her past. I believe in that too, she said. Honesty and second chances. To second chances, then, Quinn said, raising her hand for another kiss. And to futures that start today. 6 months later, Charlotte stood in the parlor of the ranch house, Mary Wilson making final adjustments to her wedding dress. The simple ivory gown, made of silk ordered specially from San Antonio, fell in elegant lines from Charlotte's shoulders. You look beautiful, Mary said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Quinn won't know what hit him. Charlotte smiled, touching the small pearl buttons at her wrist. Thank you for coming all this way and for making this dress. I wouldn't have missed it. Mary squeezed her friend's hand. You deserve this happiness, Charlotte, more than anyone I know. A knock at the door preceded Rose's entrance. At 15, she had grown taller over the past months, and today she wore a blue dress that made her look more young woman than girl. The minister's here, she announced, then stopped, her eyes widening. Charlotte, you look like something from a storybook. Charlotte opened her arms and Rose crossed the room to embrace her. Thank you for accepting me into your family, Charlotte whispered. Thank you for making Quinn smile again, Rose replied, pulling back with suspiciously bright eyes. And for teaching me that women can be both smart and happy. Another knock, more hesitant this time. It's time, called Mrs. Abernathy from the hallway. Charlotte took a deep breath, looking at her reflection one last time. The woman in the mirror was different from the one who had stood on that Silver Creek boardwalk less than a year ago, stronger, happier, loved. The ceremony was small but perfect, held in the ranch's garden where spring wildflowers created a natural backdrop. Quinn, fully recovered and handsome in a new suit, watched Charlotte approach with such undisguised love that she nearly forgot to breathe. They spoke their vows clearly, promises of love and respect echoing in the open air. When Quinn slipped the gold band onto her finger, his mother's ring, which Rose had kept safe, Charlotte felt the last piece of her heart lock into place. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Quinn cradled Charlotte's face gently in his hands. "My future," he whispered for her ears alone, "starting now." His kiss was a promise, a beginning, and a homecoming all at once. Later, as the small gathering of friends and ranch hands celebrated with food and music, Charlotte found herself momentarily alone, watching Quinn laugh with Rose near the dance floor they had constructed on the lawn. Mary appeared at her side, champagne in hand. "So," she said with a knowing smile, "was it worth it?" Leaving Silver Creek behind, Charlotte thought of the town where she had been born, where she had known both happiness and deepest pain. She thought of the people who had pointed and called her ruined, never knowing that their cruelty had ultimately set her on the path to finding Quinn. "I didn't leave it behind," she said thoughtfully. "I carried the lessons with me about resilience, about judgment, about the difference between reputation and character." She looked across at Quinn, who caught her eye and smiled, the love in his gaze visible even from a distance. "But yes," she continued, her heart full to bursting, "it was worth every step that led me here." Quinn crossed to her, hand extended in invitation. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Yates?" Charlotte took his hand, feeling the rightness of her new name, her new life. "You may have every dance, Mr. Yates, today and all our tomorrows." As he led her to the center of the makeshift dance floor, Charlotte knew with absolute certainty that this was what healing truly meant, not the absence of past wounds, but the courage to build something beautiful despite them. Under the wide Texas sky, in the arms of the man who had seen not her ruin but her future, Charlotte Newcomb Yates danced toward a life that had once seemed impossible, but now stretched before her, full of promise and possibility.